Hello there. Following on from my negative traits guide, it's time for everyone's favorite, the positives. There are so many juicy ones to pick from, and I'm here to walk you through which ones will be good for your build. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. If you could just hit that subscribe button, it would go a long way. I'm hoping to hit 1,000 by the end of the year, and honestly, it would be the best Christmas gift that I could ask for. That said, let us begin. Starting off with Sunday Driver's stepbrother, Speed Demon. It gives 100% increased gear switching speed, 15% top speed for all vehicles, and 200% to engine loudness when reversing. Now, contrary to popular belief, this trait isn't as good as it seems. Sure, you will drive faster than a bat out of hell, but this can result in you crashing your sweet set of wheels more often if you aren't careful. Cars are huge noise generators and can easily attract large groups of your favorite neighbors. The massive increase to engine loudness when reversing will often cause more trouble than it's worth, especially when you and a group of mates are trying to loot places in high population areas like Louisville. For the 1 point it costs, you'll be fine without taking it. Trust me. Cat's Eyes gives you 20% better vision at night. Honestly, this one's actually pretty good. Nighttime in Project Zomboid can get quite dark, and this trait comes in handy when your flashlight runs out of batteries and you need to navigate out of a sticky situation quickly. It only costs 2 points and is a really good consideration for the quality of life that it brings. This one fast became a staple for me and for a lot of other players. Dexterous gives 50% faster inventory transferring time, which is just too good to pass up. You will learn to love this trait when you're engaging in ambitious building projects and need to haul large amounts of construction materials or even general loot management. For all you hoarders out there. It's really cheap too, only costing 2 points. In my opinion, you should always be taking this in multiplayer. Fast Reader gives you 30% faster reading speed. Considering that you cannot speed up time in multiplayer like you can in solo, this is a massive quality of life boost. I know we all love reading our skill books, and this will help you get through them quicker in a co-op playthrough so you can get back to doing the fun stuff. At 2 points, it won't put a massive dent in your point balance either. Another one of the staple positives that most players take. Outdoorsman gives you a host of benefits, namely less chances of catching a cold, 50% less chance of getting hurt when moving through trees, lighting fires faster, and less chances of breaking fire kindling. Outdoorsman also nullifies some of the effects of the negative trait prone to illness, and especially helps if you enjoy surviving out in the wilds. It's cost effective too, only setting you back 2 points. Wakeful reduces your tiredness rate gain by 30% and gives 25% increased tiredness recovery when sleeping. On paper, this bad boy allows you to do way more in a day, as you'll get tired slower. The downside is that once you've finished all you want to get done for the day, your character might struggle to go to bed at a reasonable hour. This is where sleeping pills come in. Munch on a few and you'll catch some beauty sleep. At 2 points, it's a worthwhile consideration. Iron Gut reduces your chances to get food illness by 50%, along with a reduction to how long it lasts. This trait is not worth the points, as food poisoning only comes from eating rotten or uncooked food, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. It's much better to take the negative trait Weak Stomach, as it is free points to use on more productive positive traits. Angler gives +1 to fishing, as well as the knowledge of how to craft and repair fishing rods. Costing 4 points, choosing this trait is personal preference in my opinion. If you're planning on doing a playthrough near a river and want to sustain yourself by fishing, this is definitely a must pick. Also works if you plan on being a dedicated fisherman for your group in multiplayer. One of the few traits that gives a bonus to Long Blunt. Baseball player gives you +1 to Long Blunt and is perfect for those who, well, like long blunt weapons. Not much else to say about this one. Costing 4 points, it's worthwhile if you want to focus on this weapon type in your playthrough. Ah, Brave. The budget alternative to Veteran's Desensitized trait that packs quite a punch for the 4 points it costs. Brave reduces panic gain from all sources except for phobias and night terrors by 70%. Handy to have to manage panic overall and to reduce reliance on beta blockers. This trait excels for melee-focused combat builds, as large groups of zombies will quickly send your character into panic overdrive, especially in the early game. Brave allows you to heavily reduce the melee damage debuff that panic gives, giving you a massive upper hand in close combat. First Aider gives you +1 to first aid. In all honesty, unless you are specifically role-playing as a doctor for your group in multiplayer, burning 4 points on this is not worth it. In the current state of the game, you can get by just fine with bandaging most wounds and waiting for it to heal. Your first aid skill will level up passively over time. For our green thumb survivors out there, Gardener gives you +1 to farming, as well as the knowledge to create sprays to remedy plant diseases. Farming has long been a staple way for players to sustain themselves over long playthroughs. Now, this trait is again personal preference and build specific. If you want to get started in farming earlier than most, you can pick this. Also works if you want to be a dedicated farmer for your group in multiplayer. For the 4 points it costs, it's a decent addition to farming focused character builds. In an ideal world, Graceful would be good for a stealth focused build. Unfortunately, that is not the case in the current state of the game. Graceful gives you 40% reduced footstep sound radius and less chances to trip when vaulting or bumping into your neighbors. I've done extensive testing on stealth and have found that it's not worth taking traits like these at the moment. You're better off taking Conspicuous and using the increased chance to get spotted as a tool to clear out hordes. In my opinion, the 4 points it costs are better invested elsewhere. Following on from Graceful comes Inconspicuous. Inconspicuous reduces the chances of being spotted by zombies by 50%. This one is a bit of a noob trap and actually works against you more than it helps. Counterintuitive, I know. As I said before, you're better off using Conspicuous for the increased chance to get spotted, which will help you clear out groups better. Currently in Project Zomboid, you will get spotted almost always when you step into a zombie's line of sight, due to how zombie aggro currently works. Spend those points on other traits, Survivor, you'll thank me later. Light Eater reduces hunger rate by 25%. This can be beneficial depending on how you look at it. The 25% reduced hunger rate can work wonders when you're out on extended supply runs and will help your food supplies last longer in general, meaning less food supply runs. Pretty good quality of life trait for the 4 points it costs. On the other hand, you will be perfectly fine not taking this, as long as you don't eat the moment you become slightly peckish. Lucky does indeed have an effect on finding rare loot. Taking Lucky will give you a 10% bonus to finding rare loot like rare guns, weapons, generators, ammo, and more. Lucky compounded with higher loot settings on a custom sandbox does have a bigger effect, but this trait is largely situational. Some view it as a placebo, some not. That would be for you to decide. In my experience in testing, it has shown promise, but then again, it could just be luck of the draw. For the 4 points it costs, it would be worth taking as a throwaway trade after you've sorted out your main choices. Nutritionist allows you to see the nutritional values of food. Now, if you have a good grasp of the game and know your food types, it wouldn't be worth taking this. In general, you can see the nutritional values of food that is packaged. Where this would shine is later on in the game and you're cooking meals out of supplies you've gathered from the wild or via farming and want to manage your weight. Nutrition values of food governs weight management, which is a pretty vital stat in Project Zomboid. Ideally, you want to keep your weight between the optimal 76 to 84 kilo range, as this won't give you any debuffs. A little more legwork, but you can also see the nutritional value of food via the wiki. I've used this in a few testing playthroughs and find it doesn't really have enough benefits to warrant using 4 points to take this. But as always, you do you. Another potential noob trap, which is understandable. Resilient is the positive cousin to prone to illness and gives 25% slower rate of zombification and less chances to catch a cold. In my negative traits video, I explained why it would be better to take prone to illness instead. Getting bitten in Project Zomboid means death either way, so you will still have to lock your body up in a safe place and wait to die. The increased chance to catch a cold from prone to illness is nullified by taking Outdoorsman. This combination will leave you with more points to spend on other traits. While the 4 points Resilient sets you back, there are better traits to invest in. Runner gives +1 to sprinting. So, in most cases you won't be sprinting much as your base walking speed outruns Shamblers. Taking Runner would be better suited if you like playing with sprinters on and want to get a head start on leveling your sprinting skill. Otherwise, sprinting is not that difficult to level and will level passively over time. It costs 4 points, so take this if you like Shamblers. You little masochist you. Tailoring is a pretty underrated skill in Project Zomboid. It allows you to repair your favorite clothes and even make them stronger. Sower gives +1 to tailoring as well as an XP boost to a skill that can be quite a pain in the ass to level. Sower is a good option for those who want to focus a bit more on tailoring in their run or want to build a dedicated tailor build for their group in multiplayer. Being one of the more difficult skills to grind, you'd need all the help you can get. Amateur Mechanic is a pretty solid trait to take as one of your filler traits. Cars are abundant throughout the map, but most likely won't be in the best condition, so having a leg up in mechanics is good to help you get around easier. Amateur Mechanic gives you +1 to mechanics. It also gives you the knowledge of how to repair and maintain common and commercial vehicles, but not sports models. For that, you would need to rummage around for the magazine. Ordinarily, you'd have to find the required magazine to be able to work on the respective car type. These may or may not be hard to find depending on how blessed you are with RNG. Picking the mechanic occupation will skip this step entirely. However, if you aren't planning on taking mechanic and opted to go with another occupation instead, taking amateur mechanic serves as a good way to round off your character's skill set and will serve you well for extended playthroughs. It's not too expensive, only costing 5 points. Gymnast is okay at best. It gives you +1 to light-footed and +1 to nimble. Of these two, nimble is the better option as that affects your movement speed in melee combat. Light-footed falls within the stealth category and isn't too helpful in most cases as it affects footstep noise. Nimble falls into the category of being an absolute mission to grind, so having Gymnast in your build helps drastically with the XP boost to nimble. Brawler shines for players who want to focus on melee combat. It gives +1 to axe and +1 to long blunt. Aside from baseball player, it's the only other trait that gives a bonus to long blunt. It's also the only positive trait that gives a bonus to axe, aside from the occupations. This makes Brawler a great addition for those who like to pick lumberjack or fire officer. Your axe skill will be level 10 before you know it. It is approaching the costly side with costing 6 points, but definitely a worthwhile consideration if you want to focus on melee combat. Cook is meh at best. It gives +2 to cooking. According to the wiki, the recipe buff it gives is currently broken, so all you're really looking at is an XP bonus to cooking. Cooking in Project Zomboid isn't strictly necessary. You can get by just fine with leveling the skill passively. At higher levels though, cooking does allow you to make use of rotten food and dishes, which isn't half bad. Cook is either here nor there with the benefits it gives, and in my opinion, isn't worth the 6 points. On paper, Eagle-Eyed looks good. It gives you a wider field of view so you can increase your awareness with those superhuman peepers of yours. However, for the 6 points it costs, there are better choices out there. Eagle-Eyed does indeed increase your cone of vision and causes zombies to fade from your vision 50% slower. A good habit to get into in any case is practicing situational awareness when out and about. Keeping your head on a swivel will work just fine. Keep up that habit, and you won't need to take Eagle-Eyed. Fast Healer increases your recovery time for injuries by 20%. Considering that, in the current state of the game, most injuries will recover just fine with bandages and a little time, taking Fast Healer would be a waste of points. Sure, the 20% increased recovery rate does make it slightly faster, but not enough to make a significant impact. A better option would be to take Slow Healer instead and use the points for other traits. A word of warning though, taking Slow Healer does mean that broken bones will heal much slower. Just make sure to not do anything stupid and you'll be okay. I believe in you. Fast Learner gives a 30% increased XP boost to all skills except for fitness and strength. It's a good pick if you aren't a fan of grinding or are playing on a custom sandbox with a default XP modifier. Fast Learner would help make the process of some of the more difficult skills to level a bit more bearable. It's worth picking if you aren't looking to do a lengthy playthrough and want to get up to speed quicker. Fit falls into the adaptive trait category, meaning you can gain and equally lose the trait as your fitness level changes. Now, Fit is gained when you reach level 6 and is replaced by Athletic when you reach level 9. Don't be fooled though, it will take you a very long while to get there. For those of you who have survived that long and realized how tedious it is to level, you understand. Fitness affects your general stamina while running, how quickly you get tired during combat, your block chance when being damaged by zombies, and more. All in all, it isn't a bad option to take and only costs 6 points. Former Scout is okay. It gives +1 to first aid and +1 to foraging. The first aid bonus isn't anything to write home about, but the foraging could be a slightly better benefit. You can find pretty much anything with foraging, and Former Scout gives you a pretty decent increase to your search radius when in search mode. If you're the kind of player who likes roughing it out in the woods with nothing but the invisible turkeys to keep you company, it might be okay to take. For what it offers, it's pretty expensive at a 6-point cost. It's a situational pick. Herbalist allows you to identify medicinal herbs, craft poultices from them, and identify which forage foods are poisonous. These poultices will help wounds recover faster. The only time I'd recommend taking Herbalist is if you plan to take Illiterate. If you aren't planning on taking Illiterate, you can gain the effects of this trait by reading the Herbalist magazine, so it would essentially be a waste of 6 points. A bit of a strange one, Hiker is one of those up in the air traits that I feel is a bit overshadowed by Hunter. It gives you +1 to foraging and +1 to trapping, along with being able to craft various traps for surviving out in the wild. Now, for a whole 2 points more, you could pick Hunter and get a whole lot more bang for your buck. Hiker gives you a slight increased radius to your search mode, and the trapping is okay. At 6 points, it's expensive for what it offers. Keen Hearing increases your perception radius around your character drastically, allowing you to spot zombies sneaking up behind you much sooner than without it. This could come in handy for a number of reasons, namely helping prevent your neighbors from nibbling on your ankles from behind. For the 6 points it costs, this one is personal preference. After a bit of testing, I noticed it does increase the circle quite a bit. Now, with good situational awareness, you can get around picking this. It acts as more of a quality of life trait instead of being mandatory. Assuming you don't pick any trait that affects your hearing, the base perception radius is still really good. If you have the points to spare, it's a worthwhile consideration. So, in my previous videos, you may have seen me pick High Thirst a few times. After swapping it out for Low Thirst in a few playthroughs, I've grown to love this trait. On long supply runs, the 50% reduction to thirst helps quite a bit. It also means you won't have to carry around 3 or more water bottles, which can take up quite a bit of space in your inventory. This one works quite well if you plan on doing a long playthrough, but isn't necessary on shorter ones. In my humble opinion, this one should be a staple in every build. Organized increases container size by 30%, which is massive and goes a long way. It doesn't affect your character's main inventory, strength is responsible for that, but it does affect backpacks and general storage. You'll learn to love this when your car storage space goes almost as high as 200 kilos. Perfect for the loot goblins out there. A heads up for multiplayer. If you take this and your friends don't, you will be able to fill containers past the capacity that they are able to store items in. For what it offers, it's worth the 6 points. Stout grants extra knockback from melee weapons and increased carrying capacity due to your strength being level 6. It's replaced by strong when you reach strength level 9. Out of fitness and strength, strength is slightly easier to level. Personally, I would spend the 4 extra points and go for strong instead, which will set your strength at 9. Very good trade for melee focused builds. Adrenaline Junkie synergizes well with panic, as it increases your movement speed when highly panicked. Now, this trait will actually fall away if you're in it for the long haul. As your panic recovery rate increases over time, you will gradually get less and less benefits from this perk. For the short term, it's pretty helpful for getting out of sticky situations. Unfortunately, Adrenaline Junkie is mutually exclusive to the other panic traits like the phobias or cowardly. Taking this will mean you will rely on your base panic rate. It's a bit costly though at 8 points, but worth considering if you're planning on building around panic. Handy is a great trait to take for the builders out there. It gives +1 to carpentry and +1 to maintenance. In addition to this, it gives +100 HP to all constructions except for walls, increases building speed and slightly increases barricading speed. On the flip side, this trait synergizes very well for spear-based builds. Taking Repairman with Handy will help you craft max condition spears much sooner as well as have them last longer due to the high maintenance. Hunter gives you a whole host of benefits. It gives you +1 to aiming, +1 to short blade, +1 to sneaking, and +1 to trapping. You will also have the knowledge of how to craft all traps from day 1. A niche pick, but a good consideration for players who enjoy surviving out in the wild and is quite balanced in the buffs that it gives. This brings us on to a fairly controversial trait, Thick-Skinned. Thick-Skinned increases the chances of not being injured by zombies by 30%, as well as less chances of being hurt when moving through trees. I ran through some of the numbers regarding the effects of Thin-Skinned in my negative traits video, but let's run through it quickly. Much like Thin-Skinned, Thick-Skinned increases your dodge chance when being damaged by zombies. Damage from zombies takes into account your block chance, your clothing protection, fitness, and your strength. Taking all of these into account, the increase from Thick-Skinned really only provides you with around 6 to 8% increased chance to not be damaged. This makes it very costly considering this, and you can get around it just by being careful. Closing in on the more expensive traits. Athletic is the big daddy to fit, giving you +4 to fitness and setting your fitness at level 9. Nice to know that we won't have to spend literal months leveling this skill. Athletic grants faster running speed as well as 60% less endurance loss when running or sprinting. Considering that fitness also affects combat stamina, we can see how this would be a great trait to take. It works well for short runs but shines in the long term. It is an adaptive trait that can be lost if you go below fitness level 9. It's costly though, at 10 points, but in my opinion it's a solid consideration as a core trait in many builds. If you can afford it, take it. Yes, strong. I usually pick this as my very first positive traits in my builds because, well, I like melee combat over firearms. If you plan on focusing on firearms in your playthrough, you can get away with not picking this. Strong gives you a 40% increase to melee damage, increased knockback from melee weapons, and a hefty increase to carrying capacity because your strength will be set at level 9. If you pick either underweight or very underweight, Strong also helps nullify the melee damage debuff those negative traits give. Definitely a worthwhile consideration. That's it for the positive traits. As always, if I have missed anything, please feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. We are here to help new players and veteran players alike get better at this amazing game. If you've made it this far, thank you. We are so close to 1,000 subs. If you would consider dropping a like and subscribing, it would help so much. Good luck out there, Survivor, and I'll see you in the next one.